Imagine arriving at university, determined to become invisible, only to discover that the one person who can see through you has just become your roommate. That was the situation Elias Rowan found himself in on the first morning of the autumn term. He had chosen the smallest apartment near campus, the one above a closed flower shop, because it was cheap, quiet, and far enough from the student residences to keep strangers from asking questions about his face. Unfortunately, the lease had one problem. The landlord had listed the apartment as a shared unit, and the second key already belonged to Mara Vale. Mara was not merely popular. She was the person students spoke about in lowered voices. She ranked first in nearly every class, never attended parties, never smiled for photographs, and could silence a noisy lecture hall with one look. The campus nickname was the Silver Window, because people could see her but never reach her. Elias expected an argument. Instead, Mara entered the apartment carrying one suitcase, a box of books, and a single framed photograph turned face down. She looked at the two rooms, the narrow kitchen, and the broken ceiling fan. "Rules," she said. Elias put down his toolbox. "That sounds serious. No guests after 10. No loud music. Do not touch my desk. Do not ask personal questions. We divide rent and utilities exactly. Anything else?" She studied him as if he were an unexpected exam question.
Do not mistake proximity for friendship. Elias agreed, because friendship was not what he wanted either. He had spent the previous year learning that attention was expensive. People liked the version of him they invented from a distance. They wanted photographs, introductions, favors, or a romantic story they could tell their friends. Elias had learned to answer politely, repair what was broken, and leave before anyone could ask where he came from. The first night, Mara discovered that Elias cooked. Not instant noodles, but a proper meal. Ginger rice, roasted vegetables, and a simple soup made from whatever he could afford at the market. "I made too much," he said. "You measured the ingredients." "I made too much on purpose." Mara stared at the bowl for several seconds. Then she sat down. Her expression did not change, but she finished everything. Elias said nothing. Mara said nothing. Outside, rain tapped against the window, and somewhere beneath the noise of the city, a low mechanical hum rose from the harbor. Mara froze. For 1 second, the apartment disappeared. She saw a boy beside a seawall, a red paper boat in his hands, and heard a tune with only 4 notes. Then the memory vanished. "Are you all right?" Elias asked. Mara looked at him too quickly. "Fine." But that night, after Elias fell asleep, Mara stood by the window and hummed the 4-note melody without realizing it. And from the other room, Elias opened his eyes. The next morning, Elias and Mara discovered that sharing an apartment was not the only coincidence waiting for them. They were in the same seminar, assigned to the same discussion group, and because the professor believed quiet students made responsible leaders, Elias was immediately appointed class coordinator. The class applauded. Elias looked horrified. Mara looked amused for exactly half a second. That half second became the first crack in her reputation. Elias's new responsibilities included organizing a campus showcase, reserving practice rooms, collecting project materials, and convincing 30 students to agree on a single schedule. Theo Park volunteered to help, though his definition of help was mostly carrying heavy objects and declaring every meeting a tactical operation. Nia Brooks joined because she wanted footage for her documentary about student life. Mara joined because the professor assigned her to supervise the budget. Their first planning meeting lasted 6 minutes before everyone began arguing. The lighting team wanted more money, the music group wanted a new stage, the art students wanted to build a floating installation in the central courtyard. Elias listened, wrote everything down, and then divided the impossible list into smaller problems. Mara watched him work. "You are not saying no to anyone," she observed. "I am saying no later, when I know which parts are actually impossible. That is inefficient. It is less efficient than letting everyone panic at once."
She almost smiled again. As the week continued, the two of them developed a rhythm neither one acknowledged. Elias left breakfast on the counter when Mara had early lectures. Mara corrected his budget spreadsheets before he submitted them. He'd repaired the loose strap on her school bag. She silently placed a new set of screws beside his toolbox after noticing the old ones were rusting. At school, however, they remained strangers. Mara sat by the window, surrounded by people who wanted her attention but rarely received it. Elias sat near the back, where he could disappear behind Theo's broad shoulders. Then, Adrian Cross began appearing. Adrian was the heir to a shipping company that had been competing with Celine Vale's logistics firm for years. He dressed as if every hallway were a red carpet and spoke to Mara with the confidence of someone who had already received her answer. "Mara," he said one afternoon, stepping into her path, "my family is hosting a dinner this weekend. Your mother expects you to attend. She can tell me herself. She asked me to remind you. Then you have reminded me." Adrian's smile stayed in place, but his eyes hardened. "You should be careful about creating unnecessary distance." Elias heard the line while carrying a stack of event posters. Mara saw him hear it. Adrian saw Mara see him. For the first time, Elias stepped between them. Not aggressively, just enough to place the posters on the table and interrupt the arrangement of the room. "Mara, the budget forms need your signature." Adrian looked at him. "And you are?" "The person holding the forms?" Theo coughed to hide a laugh. Nia did not hide hers. Mara signed the pages and walked away with Elias. They did not speak until they reached the stairs. "You did not need to interfere," she said. "I was holding the forms." "That is not what I meant." Elias looked at her. "I know." That answer stayed with her longer than it should have. Elias worked at a tea shop called Lantern Cup, a narrow place with blue stools, warm lights, and a manager who believed every customer problem could be solved with extra tapioca pearls. Mara discovered the shop by accident when a rainstorm trapped her under its awning. Elias was behind the counter, wearing an apron and a paper hat that made him look less mysterious and more exhausted. "You work here?" she asked. "Only when I am not being class coordinator, student, or roommate." "What do you recommend?" "The jasmine tea." That was immediate.
I made the jasmine tea. Mara ordered it. She sat in the corner with her laptop, intending to stay for 10 minutes. 2 hours later, she was still there, pretending to read while watching Elias move between the register and the kitchen. The next week, she applied for a job at the small market next door. Elias noticed. He did not ask why.
Their schedules began to overlap. He closed the tea shop at 9. Mara finished at the market at 9:15. They walked home together beneath the harbor lights, carrying unsold pastries and bruised fruit the managers allowed them to take. Mara learned that Elias knew every shortcut through the city. Elias learned that Mara counted steps when she was anxious. Nia learned that both of them were pretending not to wait for the other at the end of each shift. One evening, the power went out across the block. The market doors locked automatically, trapping Mara inside with only emergency lights. Elias saw the dark storefront and came running from Lantern Cup. The manager opened the door. Mara emerged with her expression perfectly controlled. "You could have waited for the electrician," she said. "You could have called me. I did not need help." "I know." "Then why did you come?" Elias held up the flashlight. "Because I had one." She looked at the light, then at him. "That is a terrible answer." "It is the honest one." They walked home without speaking. At the apartment, Mara placed her keys on the counter and began humming the 4-note melody from the rainstorm. Elias stopped moving. "Where did you hear that?" he asked. Mara's face closed immediately. "I do not know." "You were humming it yesterday, too." "Then perhaps it is common." "It is not." The room became very quiet. When Elias was 8 years old, he had spent one summer in the harbor district with his grandfather. A girl named Mira had lived in the blue house near the seawall. She had been afraid of storms, so Elias made paper boats and taught her a melody he claimed could guide boats home. Then a storm destroyed the seawall. Elias's family moved away. The girl disappeared before he could say goodbye. He had spent years believing the memory was too small to matter. Now, Mara was standing in the kitchen, humming the exact melody. But when he asked her name, she said, "Mara." And Elias decided not to tell her about Mira yet. Mara's mother, Celine Vale, did not trust coincidences. When her driver reported that Mara was sharing an apartment with a young man who worked evenings and had no prominent family name, Celine ordered a background check. She learned that Elias lived with his grandfather during school breaks. She learned about the tea shop, the repaired boats, the scholarship, and the fact that Elias had once been hospitalized after pulling 2 children from a flooded pier. She also learned that his grandfather had been a marine engineer who worked on the original harbor barrier, the same barrier destroyed in the storm that separated Mara from her childhood friend. Celine did not tell Mara. Instead, she invited Elias to the Vale headquarters. The building rose above the harbor like a sheet of dark glass.
Elias arrived in a borrowed jacket and immediately regretted accepting the invitation. Celine met him in a conference room with a view of the city. "You have been helpful to my daughter," she said. "I share an apartment with her. We help each other. Do you understand the difference between helping and becoming involved?" Elias looked through the glass at the cranes along the waterfront.
Not always. Celine slid a folder across the table. Adrian Cross has been trying to attach his family to ours through Mara. Your presence complicates that. You invited me here to warn me? I invited you here to ask what you want. Elias did not touch the folder. I want Mara to make her own decisions. Celine's expression shifted, almost imperceptibly. That is an answer people give when they have not yet understood the cost. The cost of what? Of standing beside someone whose life is not private. When Elias returned home, Mara was waiting in the kitchen. My mother called you. She did. What did she want? To know whether I am dangerous. Mara's eyes narrowed. What did you say? That I am mostly bad at assembling furniture. A small laugh escaped her before she could stop it. It was the first real laugh Elias had heard from her. Then she turned serious. My mother thinks every person is a strategy. She is trying to arrange my future before I can choose it. Is Adrian part of that future? No. Do you want him to stop? I have told him to stop. That is not what I asked. Mara looked toward the window. The harbor lights reflected in her eyes. I want to stop feeling as if every decision I make will hurt someone, she said. My mother built the company after my father left. She believes control is the same as protection. If I reject her plans, she hears rejection of everything she sacrificed. Elias sat across from her. You are allowed to be grateful and still disagree. Mara looked at him. Who taught you that? My grandfather. He is wrong about many things, but not that. Outside, a ship horn sounded. Mara's hand tightened around her mug. The melody returned to her, clearer this time. 4 notes, then a 5th that rose like a question. She saw a boy's wet hair, a red paper boat, and a promise spoken beside the sea. Wait for me, the boy had said. Mara stood so suddenly that her chair scraped the floor. Elias reached for her. Mara? She pulled away. I need air. She ran down the stairs and into the night. The campus showcase was supposed to be a simple event. Instead, it became the emotional center of the entire semester. The art team built a paper harbor above the stage. The music students arranged original songs. Theo convinced the basketball club to perform a ridiculous synchronized routine.
Nia filmed everything, including the moments when Elias and Mara forgot that they were being watched. The problem arrived 3 days before opening night. The singer scheduled for the closing performance lost her voice. The backup band canceled, and the event committee decided that Elias should perform because he had been heard humming while repairing the stage lights. I do not sing, Elias said. Theo pointed at him. You have a face that suggests emotional lyrics. That is not evidence. Nia leaned toward Mara. Can you make him do it? Mara looked at Elias. You are class coordinator. That is administrative, not musical. Then coordinate yourself toward the microphone. On opening night, the auditorium filled beyond capacity. Adrian sat in the front row beside several members of the Cross family.
Celine Vale arrived late and stood at the back, unseen by Mara. Elias walked onto the stage with no instrument except an old wooden pick he had found in his grandfather's workshop. He had intended to sing a harmless song, but when he looked toward Mara, the melody that came out was the one from the harbor. It was not a famous song. It had no title. Elias's grandfather had taught him the first 4 notes, and Elias had added the 5th for the girl who was afraid of storms. Mara stopped breathing. The stage lights softened. The paper harbor turned gold. The room disappeared, and the memory finally opened.
She was 8 years old again. Her name was not Mara then. It was Mira Vale, and she had just learned that her father was leaving. She had run to the seawall during the storm, carrying a red paper boat. Elias, another boy, another life, had found her there. "You cannot stay here," he had told her. "I do not want to go home." "Then take the boat. It will sink. Only if you stop watching it." He had sung the melody to make her look up. Then he had promised, with the complete confidence only children possess, that he would find her again. The next morning, the flood destroyed the road. Mira was sent to live with relatives inland. The photograph in her apartment was the only thing she carried, but over time, the boy's face faded. The song remained. Back in the auditorium, Elias finished the melody. Mara left before the applause began. Elias followed her to the empty corridor. She stood beside a window, shaking with anger. Not at him, but at the years that had stolen the truth. "Your name was Elias Rowan," she said. He stopped. "You lived near the Blue House. You made boats from grocery receipts. You said the tide could remember people." Elias's eyes filled before he could hide it. "Mira?" She nodded. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Mara struck his shoulder with the side of her hand. "You took too long. I was 8. You still took too long." He laughed, and she began to cry. They did not kiss. They did not make a dramatic promise. They simply sat on the corridor floor while the audience applauded behind the closed doors. Some reunions do not begin with fireworks. Sometimes they begin with 2 people realizing that the loneliness they carried had once belonged to both of them. After the showcase, Mara remembered enough to become curious, but not enough to feel safe. She wanted proof. Elias wanted time. So during the winter break, he invited her to his grandfather's house at the edge of the harbor. The house was small, weathered, and full of objects that had survived more storms than people. Nets hung from the porch. Brass instruments covered the walls. In the workshop, hundreds of wooden boats waited on shelves. Elias's grandfather, Jonah Rowan, opened the door and looked at Mara for a long time. Then he said, "The girl with the red boat." Mara's controlled expression collapsed. Jonah remembered everything. He remembered Mira hiding beneath the workbench during thunderstorms. He remembered Elias sneaking extra bread to the Blue House. He remembered the morning the road flooded
and a family car took Mira away. But he also remembered something Mara did not. The red paper boat had been carved with a tiny silver star. Elias had placed it beneath the floorboards of the workshop after searching the flooded shoreline for hours.
Jonah led them to a loose plank. The boat was still there. Mara held it with both hands. The paper had become stiff and brown, but the silver star remained. "I thought you forgot me," she said. Elias shook his head. "I thought you forgot me." Then we were both wrong. The visit might have stayed peaceful if Adrian Cross had not arrived at the house with 2 assistants and an expression of rehearsed concern. He claimed Celine had sent him to bring Mara home. Mara refused. Adrian's polite mask slipped. "You cannot keep hiding in places like this," he said. "Your mother is negotiating the harbor contract. Your absence is becoming a public statement." Mara stepped forward. "I am not a contract." "Not to me." "Then why do you speak as if I belong to your family?" Adrian looked at Elias. "Because people like him enjoy pretending they can protect you." Elias stayed silent. He knew a public argument would become another weapon against Mara. But Adrian had brought the argument to the wrong place. Jonah, who had spent 70 years repairing boats and refusing to tolerate arrogance, walked onto the porch with a heavy wrench in one hand. "Young man," he said, "if you came to collect someone, bring a receipt. Otherwise, leave." Theo, who had secretly followed the car because he believed every crisis required a witness, whispered from behind a tree, "That is the best sentence of the year." Adrian left, but the damage was done. Mara's mother called that evening. She demanded that Mara return to the city and accused Elias of manipulating her. Mara listened until the call ended. Then she placed the red boat on the table. "I am going back," she said. Elias's face tightened. "Because she told you to?" "Because I need to stop letting other people define the story." He wanted to say that he would go with her. Instead, he asked, "Do you want me there?" Mara looked at the old boat. "Yes," she said. "But not as my protector. As the person who remembers what happened before everyone else started rewriting it." That was the first time she chose him openly. Back on campus, rumors moved faster than facts. Students said Mara had a secret boyfriend. Others said Elias was using her family name. Adrian encouraged both stories by smiling whenever anyone asked. Elias tried to ignore it. Mara tried to outstare it. Neither strategy worked. The university basketball match became the next battlefield. Theo's team needed Elias on the roster because one player was injured, and Elias reluctantly agreed. He was not a star athlete, but years of helping his grandfather had made him strong, balanced, and stubborn. Adrian joined the opposing team at the last minute. The match began as sport and became theater. Adrian played aggressively, stepping into Elias's space, making comments about the apartment, the tea shop, and the charity case everyone thought Mara was supporting. Elias absorbed the insults until Adrian shoved Theo near the bleachers. Elias moved before he thought. He caught Adrian's arm, redirected his momentum, and sent the ball rolling across the court. The crowd fell silent. Elias did not hit him. He did not need to. He simply held Adrian's gaze and said,
You do not get to turn everyone around you into collateral damage. The referee separated them. The match resumed. Theo scored the winning basket with 3 seconds left and celebrated as if he had personally defeated an empire. But the video of the confrontation spread across campus. By the next morning, Elias had become a hero to some students and a threat to others. Celine Vale called him again. This time, she did not invite him to headquarters. She warned him that the Cross family was preparing a formal challenge to the harbor redevelopment deal, and that Mara might be used as leverage. Mara heard the call. She confronted her mother in the Vale headquarters, with Elias, Nia, and Theo waiting outside the conference room. "You investigated him before I even asked his name," Mara said. "I investigated a risk." "You investigated a person and called him a risk." "I was trying to protect you." "Then you should have asked what protection meant to me." Celine's voice softened. "You think I do not remember the storm? I remember carrying you through the flooded station.
I remember promising I would never let anyone take your future away." Mara placed the red boat on the table. "You kept your promise," she said. "But then you started taking my choices away yourself." Celine stared at the boat. Recognition crossed her face. She had seen it before, the morning Mara was taken inland. She had believed the boy was a temporary childhood memory, a danger that would fade. She had never understood that the memory was the part of Mara that survived. Adrian entered the room without permission. He announced that the Cross family would withdraw from negotiations unless Mara attended a public dinner and confirmed their partnership. Mara looked at him. No. Adrian blinked. "You should think carefully." "I have been thinking carefully for years." He turned toward Elias. "And you are going to let her throw away everything for you?" Elias answered before Mara could. "She is not throwing anything away. She is finally deciding what belongs to her." Adrian's control broke. He accused them of staging a romance to influence the negotiations. Mara stepped beside Elias and took his hand. The room went still. "Then let everyone hear the truth," she said. "Elias Rowan is my boyfriend." It was supposed to be a shield, a simple public statement to stop Adrian from treating Elias as an outsider. But the moment the words left her mouth, Mara realized they were not entirely pretend.
Elias looked down at their joined hands. His fingers tightened around hers. The public declaration changed everything. Students discussed it. Investors questioned it. Celine demanded explanations. Theo designed matching team jackets before anyone had agreed to date officially. Mara insisted the statement had been strategic. Elias agreed. Nia did not believe either of them. For 2 weeks, they performed the role of a couple whenever Adrian or the business press appeared. They walked across campus together. They attended the harbor committee meeting together. Elias held Mara's umbrella. Mara stole food from his plate and called it relationship research. The performance became dangerous because it was easy. Mara stopped counting steps when she was anxious if Elias was nearby. Elias stopped leaving rooms before people could ask personal questions.
They learned that domestic life did not become romantic through grand gestures. It became romantic through repetition. 2 mugs beside the sink, 2 coats on the same hook, 2 people who knew when silence meant anger and when it meant rest. The real crisis arrived when Celine discovered that the old harbor barrier had not failed because of the storm alone. The original construction records showed that a cross subcontractor had ignored a safety warning years earlier. The accident that separated Elias and Mara had been treated as natural damage, but the negligence had been hidden to protect the redevelopment deal. Adrian's family had not planned the storm.
They had simply profited from the weakness it exposed. Mara wanted to release the records immediately. Celine wanted to verify every page. Elias understood both sides. Naya helped organize the evidence. Theo persuaded the student council to host a public forum at the harbor. On the night of the forum, the weather turned rough. Wind pushed against the temporary stage, and rain blurred the city lights. Students gathered under umbrellas while Celine Vale presented the engineering records. Adrian arrived with lawyers and demanded that the documents be removed. But this time, the room did not belong to him. The students had seen the old photos. They had heard Jonah's testimony. They had watched Mara choose her own voice. Celine admitted that she had known the records were incomplete. She had feared reopening the investigation would destroy the company she built. Then she looked at Mara and said, "I thought protecting the future meant burying the past." Mara answered, "The past is not buried. It is waiting for someone to tell the truth." The forum continued until midnight. The contract was suspended. A formal investigation began. Adrian lost the certainty that had carried him through every room. Afterward, Elias and Mara walked to the old seawall. The rain had stopped. The tide moved below them, dark and silver. Mara carried the red paper boat in a clear case. "I have a question," she said. Elias braced himself. "That sounds dangerous. Why did you never look for me?" He thought about the years between the storm and the apartment. "I did. I just did not know where to look. Every time I saw a girl with your hair, I wondered. Eventually, I decided it was kinder to remember you as a promise than to discover I had remembered you wrong." Mara looked toward the water. "I remembered you as a song." Elias smiled. "That is more embarrassing." "It is not." She opened the case and placed the red boat in his hands. "I do not want to be the silver window anymore," she said. "I do not want people to admire me from a safe distance." "Then what do you want?" Mara turned to him. For once, she did not look guarded. She looked frightened, hopeful, and completely certain. "I want to know what happens after the story people remember." Elias reached for her hand. "Then we can find out." This time, when she kissed him, there was no audience, no rival, no family negotiation, and no strategy. There was only the harbor, the wind, and the melody they had carried across 14 years. The story began with 2 strangers sharing a cheap apartment. It became a story about a girl who recovered her past, a boy who stopped hiding from his future, and a family that learned protection without control. But most of all, it became a reminder that some people do not return to us because fate is dramatic. They return because somewhere beneath the noise of time, a small melody is still waiting to be heard. And when the tide finally brings it back, we have to decide whether we are brave enough to answer.